So please give Jessica a big round of applause.
Thank you. Thank you. So I want to tell you the story of how we revolutionized the developer experience with 3.5 platform engineers. And before you ask, I'm the half, so I'm not trying to call someone else cut in half. So the story takes place at a company called Cognic. We were previously known as Anotel, and then last summer we did a rebranding to better fit our market. And the reason why I mentioned rebranding is, one, people might not recognize us otherwise, and two, because it takes place in this story, so I will get back to that later on. We are building a data platform for accelerating machine learning for performance-critical applications. I'm not really here to talk about our products. If you want to talk more about it, come find me afterwards, and I will tell you more. But what I think is interesting is that we are building a SaaS platform. We are a software company, and we have a SaaS platform that is running on the cloud. So a lot of the things that I talk about is based on the assumption that we are in a cloud-native environment. The company was founded back in 2018, and we have a headquarters in Gothenburg, Sweden, and we are currently around 100 employees, out of which 45 people are working in the engineering department. I think the size of the company matters because a lot of things that I will say is based on the assumption that you're running in a small organization, and I heard people say that you can't have a platform team unless you are a very large company. I think that's not true because we have one, and I think we have a great value from it, and I want to tell you why I think so. A little bit about me. I'm the product area lead for engineering enablement. That is our internal platform function. I'm also a CNCF ambassador, and I'm involved in Cloud Native Nordics. I've seen a lot of friends from the Nordics around here, so hi, good to see you. Nice to meet you in person. And I'm also a meetup organizer in Gothenburg. And I used this image when I went to the US because they might not know where Gothenburg is, but in case anyone of you are curious, that's where I'm located. So I want to tell you the story of where we were when I started. It was 3 years ago. It was June 2020. And then I want to take you through the story of how we started introducing platforming team and how we started revolutionizing the developer experience. And I want to give you 3 concrete examples of what tools we use to do this. So we use external DNS, we use Cert Manager, and we use Argo CD. And this story stretches basically from June 2020 until September 2022. So what do I mean when I say developer experience? How many of you in here would say that you feel confident of what developer experience means? Hands up. Okay, or maybe people are still sleeping after the lunch. So for me, developer experience is very much similar to user experience, but instead of users, the developers are our user in this state. So we want to improve the experience of being a developer at Cognic. We want their lives to be easier. We want it to be very easy for them to do the things they want to do. So why do I care about developer experience? In my background, I have been all over the stack, I usually say. I've been a full stack developer, I've been a backend developer, I've been an operations team, I've been a platform engineer. I've done a little bit all parts of software development. I take no credit for any of the CSS I've written. I've written CSS, I take no credit for it. But as a developer, you want to build a good product. You want to create something that's really nice. And being a developer, it's so much easier when you can build on top of something that already exists. Like if you don't have to reinvent the wheel for all the things that you do. And to make the developers' lives easier has become kind of a mission for me. And I think that there's so much we can do to improve the way that things are for them. So if we take a look at these things, I do realize the black on purple might be hard to read, but I will tell you what it's all about. So basically, I try to gather all the things that are part of being a developer life. So at Cognic, the developers had to care about continuous integration. They had to care about continuous deployment, load balancing, runtime, in our case on top of Kubernetes, business logic, metrics, authentication, logging, and security. But what they really care about, and the thing that makes us stand out and have a really good product, is really the business logic. This is where we make a difference. This is where we, as a company, have our edge towards everyone else, because the reason why all of us is here is because we have those problems in common. We can learn from each other. It's not a unique problem for Cognic. But the business logic, this is what is our problem, what we want to focus on. So what I want to do is that I want to make it easier for our developers to spend more time on the purple box and less time on the gray boxes. The way I do that, and the way and the strategy that we have for that, is that we want to create a golden path or a paved road. This is something that has been up like a lot in the industry in the last couple of years. And it's really the idea of having a platform that solves the common needs and allows developers to focus on what is important. We want to allow them to focus on the business logic. And there is a really good talk from KubeCon, Cloud Native Con Europe last year from Daniel Bryant that is called From Kubernetes to PaaS to What's Next. And I have a link in the end where you can see that talk if you want to. But what he talks about is like, okay, so we all agree that we need a common platform. We all agree that a golden path would be something good. So what can that look like? And what is the next step? We have Kubernetes, what's the next step? And I recommend looking at that. So just to reiterate, why do we have developers? Why? It's not because we like code. I mean, yes, we like code, but code in itself is not the value. We have developers because we want them to produce business value. And we want them to produce business value in such a way that we can make an impact as a company. So, of all the things that I told you, I think a lot of you recognize yourself in it. I think it's not something that is unique. So why am I here telling you about it? I'm here because we are a small team. We are 3.5 people on the team. And I think that that makes us have to take some strategic decisions and do things in a little bit different way that hopefully can inspire. And I want to share what that is. But first, I want to start with some uncomfortable insights. At least for me, was when I started with this. I came from a large company. We were able to do a lot of cool things. But being a small team, it's like you can't do all the things. There are a lot of things that you can't do. And you won't have time. You have to be conscious of where you spend your time. And sometimes it's actually valuable to not act. It's like having been on operations, or I feel it's common for being on operations that you're very action-oriented. You get on page, you fix the problem. You are acting on something, trying to solve a problem actively. If you see the problem, you solve it. But being in a small platform team, it might not actually be valuable. It might be valuable to just wait and see, do I really see the problem as it is? Do I have to act on it? Is this a problem we need to solve? And sometimes it's valuable to not solve something. Upgrades are frequent and take time. When you are in the cloud-native space, there are so many cool things, so many awesome tools, and all of them get frequent updates. And then the security patches and all the things. Kubernetes has 4 releases per year, and then all the tooling that you have integrating with that. They take a lot of time if you want to do them in a secure way. And I think that it's worth being aware that for every new tool you add, you have to spend time on actually maintaining it, because that is not for free. And you probably don't need a service mesh. Or at least something like it. Whatever cool tech someone is up here telling you about. We had a conversation regarding Backstage. I love Backstage. I think it's a really cool tool. We don't use Backstage. I'm not sure I can motivate it because it's a lot of cost running Backstage. But whatever cool tech someone else uses and tell you about, it might not be the tool for you. So you have to evaluate all the things and decide on things that is a good fit for you. So what has our approach been then? I think sitting together and thinking about this presentation, I actually was able to, for the first time in several years, unfortunately being on this team, be able to condense the strategy down to some few points that were easy to share about. And I showed them to my team, and they were like, yeah, that's actually exactly what it is. Why haven't you told us before? And I was like, yes, that would have been a great idea. But at least I have it now. And the strategy has been to remove time-consuming tasks and bottlenecks. Super advanced, I know, right? Anyone here feel that, oh my God, that was so revolutionizing. I wish I knew this before, yeah? And in the end, it really means that unblock the developers, remove things that are blocking them, have them be able to move forward by themselves and not depend on others. Remove time-consuming tasks from the team. If you have a small team, and they are having a lot of things that take a lot of time to do, then they can't move forward. They will be stuck in a never-ending time-consuming loop. And when you free up time from the team, they can spend time on removing time-consuming tasks from the developers, and removing time-consuming tasks from the developers allow them to focus on building business logic, which allows us to be a better company and building a better product. So how do we do it? Can we give you some real examples? And this is going to get technical, so before I deep dive into that one, how many here are running Kubernetes and maintaining it themselves? How many, keep hands up if you do it. How many in here do know what Kubernetes is? Okay, good. How many in here are running workloads on top of Kubernetes? Okay, cool. I think a few other things I might mention might be new. I will show you some YAML code. You don't have to understand it, but I can do a talk about Kubernetes without YAML code. I'm going to talk about 3 different tools. I will take you through why we use them. I will take you through how we migrated to start using them. And you will see more about it. So first out is external DNS. And for us, this was the tool to unblocking developers. And in our company, we are not using a test environment that much. So whenever developers want to test something new, they push it to production. And when they push things to production, they want a DNS so they can start using it. So we need a good way to quickly, when teams are prototyping, to get a way to get a DNS connected to a new deployment and remove it when they are done. And the DNS allocation process before we introduced external DNS looked like you build the application, you deploy it so you can get an IP connected to the load balancer. You go to one of the 1 to 2 people, one of them was me, who were able to create new DNS records, and you ask for DNS. If you were lucky, you came and said already what IP you wanted connected to and what DNS you wanted. If not, you said, I want a new DNS for my application, and I had to ask, like, what name do you want? What's your IP? And we had a few back and forth. And then you wait until you get one. I try to be quick, but I mean, sometimes it takes longer. It could take up to a couple of days if you were very unlucky, minutes if you weren't. And then you get your DNS record, and you keep developing, and you're happy. Obvious blocker. Let's see if we can remove it. So we started using external DNS, and I think if you're already running Kubernetes, it's super easy to get started. We use Cloudflare for our DNS, and what we basically did was that we got an API token from Cloudflare that could give us access to the API, and we added it to the deployment configuration for external DNS, and that's basically what we had to do. Then we could just deploy it as is, and it started working. What external DNS does is that in your DNS records, it adds a TXT record that says, I'm handling this DNS record. So you get the A or a CNAME if you have a CNAME record. And then you also have the TXT record for the same name that says, this is my record. So what we did was that we first had to figure out what DNSs we had and what we were using, and remove the ones that we no longer use, because obviously that happens. We added an annotation to the service resource in Kubernetes that has the annotation that tells external DNS that this is a record that you should track. And we applied it to all the services. And then we faked the TXT records in Cloudflare, because otherwise the external DNS wouldn't start tracking existing records. But in order to get it to track the existing records, we had to create this TXT record so it thought this is something that I'm handling, so that then it would continue, remove, and add new ones. And once we had the TXT records, we could just deploy external DNS, and then external DNS would handle everything before. So when you remove the service on an application and remove the annotation for it, then the external DNS would remove the DNS record, and when you deployed a new one, it would create up a new one. So in the end, what was the DNS allocation process afterwards was that you build your app, you deploy it with annotation, you get the DNS record for free, and then you keep developing. The return on investment for this one was that we got self-serve. The developers no longer had to depend on anyone. It was very easy to use for them. It was one of the smoothest outrolling new functionality we ever done and learning curve. And if we're looking at a return on investment thing where we have investment low and high and effect low and high, this was a very low investment with a very high effect, making it a really good investment for us. Moving on to the second one, and this is remove time-consuming tasks from the team with Cert Manager. So we use Cert Manager for SSL certificates in the cluster, and the process before was that we used a custom shell script in local terminal to create a new certificate using Let's Encrypt. And then we had to manually edit secrets in Kubernetes to contain the new certificates. And then we had to do a rolling restart of all deployments because we were loading that secret into each deployment. And secrets are only loaded on deploy, like on upstart. So if you change that secret after something has started, it doesn't update the content. You have to restart it to get new content. And Let's Encrypt secrets are rotated, or SSL certificates from Let's Encrypt are only valid for 90 days. If you don't want to wait to the last minute and do a certificate rollout on Fridays, as we had yesterday, you might want to roll them every 6 days, which means that we had to do this every other month. So we installed Cert Manager, which was also very easy. And it's basically, this is a customized file. And what it does is that it pulls from GitHub the baseline for Cert Manager. And then we have a specific cluster issuer that says that connect to Cloudflare and Let's Encrypt for this. And it can also track multiple DNS zones. So if we had, for instance, we had cognic.io and cognic.com, then we could track both of them with Cert Manager at the same time. It also plays very nice with ingress resources. So somewhere around here, we stopped moving services, stopped using services for load balancers and started using ingress resources. If you're not familiar with Kubernetes, it might be yada yada, but for those who understand, we moved. And that meant that we did no longer have to do the rolling restart of all the applications, which was really nice because it became less of an event to roll the certificates. So in the end, what we did for certificate renewal after we changed to Cert Manager is basically nothing. This is the only point I have here, because we don't have to care about certificates at all, unless we're adding a new DNS zone, or if we are, for instance, doing rebranding. I will get back to that. So in the end, we got removed the manual process, and manual processes are prone to error, automation much better. We had less cognitive load on the team because no one any longer had to remember, like, okay, is it the odd number of the month? Should we renew the certificates? When were we doing that last time? And et cetera, et cetera. And we didn't have to do rolling restarts of all the things. In the end, it was what we call a medium level of return on investment, because the investment was low, but maybe the effect was also low. It wasn't really that big of a deal before, but it was nice to get rid of. So finally, I want to tell you about Argo CD. How many here are doing GitOps? I think we had this one yesterday, but I don't remember. Okay, quite a few. How many of you have heard about GitOps and know what it is? Okay, that's more. Cool. We use Argo CD for removing time-consuming tasks from the developers. It's not fully true, because it also was time-consuming for us in the platform team. And the reason was that the developers had to ask us for help whenever it broke. And the process that we had before was that we had a build pipeline that posted to the Slack channel with, like, I built X, and here's the image number. So the developer went to Slack to pick up a new image tag. And then they ran, once again, a script locally in the terminal with a new image tag and the application name. And when you manually write things here, you can see how it often gets like slightly, maybe you don't get the right name, maybe you add an S, maybe you don't have an S. And in the end, like, it often failed here because the script couldn't handle that. And in the back, like under the hood, the script was running kubectl set image, and then kubectl rollout status, and then posted to Slack, I deployed application X. And the problem with this was that it was really a black box for the developers. They didn't know these kubectl commands were run underneath the hood. They didn't know what was happening. And it was really hard for them to debug. They got like an error message from the script and they didn't know what happened, they didn't know why. So they came to us and they said like, I tried to deploy, it didn't work. And we were like, why are you not giving me any details? Why did it not work? What happened? Like, what can we do about it? And there was also like this lacking version control of Kubernetes resources that at least kept me up at night, because everything was live edited into the cluster. That meant that you had absolutely no idea to know what was deployed or why. You couldn't know, like, if you changed the configuration of something, you had no way of knowing if whatever was committed, because it was also committed to Git, maybe. And the maybe was the scary part, because did you know that the number of replicas on this one has it been changed since then? Does anyone know? Is it the right image tag in Git or not? You can't know. Are you overwriting something or not? And there was also no way to restore if in case something happened. I mean, I've lost a cluster before. I was lucky that we were able to restore a lot of things. In this case, if we would have lost the cluster, I'm not sure how much we would be able to recover. Probably not a lot. So, introducing GitOps, and since not all of you seem to know exactly what it means, I will try to go through a little bit more about the fundamentals of GitOps, and then apply it to how that helped us with the situation and the problems that I described. So there is a web page, there will be a link. I will have a final slide with a QR code that links to all the links, so don't worry about it. And the site is opengitops.dev, maybe. You will see it later on. And at least they describe what GitOps means. And like to fulfill and be GitOps, you have to have declarative setup. So a system managed by GitOps must have its desired state expressed declarative. That's like in a file. And it has to be versioned and immutable. That means that it has to be stored in such a way that it enforces immutable. And it should be pulled automatically, and it should be continuously reconciled. That means that both continuously checking has something changed, and if it changed, make sure that's what is applied live. And that's the opengitops.dev. The link will come in the end as well. So how does Argo CD help us get to this state? So how can we use that to achieve this? And because if we look at the problems we had, like we had the problems of not knowing where something changed, yes, this will help. We had a problem of not being able to restore, yes, this can help. So looking at that, we have YAML files. Everyone loves a good YAML file. And at least they're declarative. They're written down, that's there. And then if we put the YAML files in GitHub, then we get it versioned, because if we turn on master branch protection in GitHub, then we also have it immutable. We know that we can't go back and rewrite history. So we're able to see how things changed over time. And Argo CD, by definition, pulls automatically. You connect it to a GitHub repository or a Git repository, and it will be able to check automatically when something changes. And when it changes, Argo CD also applies it into the cluster. So it helps us really solve all the problems that we had. So in the end, what we did was to migrate this, we figured out what was running, which was basically a big dump from Kubernetes. And we added it to GitHub repository. And then we set up Argo CD with sync disabled. You can run it, so it like pretends that it was going to do all the things, and you can see what doesn't match. Fix all the errors. And then we announced the migration window. We turned on the syncing on Argo CD, and it all works, right? So the process for the developers afterwards was that they get the latest image tag. They update the Git repository that Argo CD looks at. And that's it. I even switched slide because I forgot there was no other pilot. So in the end, what we got was more transparent process. It was more clear. They had to learn, the developers had to learn more about Kubernetes and what's happening, but it was at least transparent. It was possible for them to change and understand what was going on. And it was much more like recoverable. If something happened, we could restore it. And it was easy to use. With a star, I will get back. So in the end, like, this was a huge effort. It took a lot of time. It was not like the 1 week change to get it up and running. We had to do a lot of migration. We had to do a lot of thinking and designing and testing and trying. But it's also been very stable since we rolled it out. We rolled it out in 2021, and we have basically not changed a lot with the configuration for how our Argo CD is set up, except for like upgrading security patches, etc. So in the long term, it's been like a low investment and a high output. So we would not change it. Remember the star on easy to use? I think that we kind of failed the rollout. There's been some talk about how to get changes out to users, how to get them on track and everything. And in the end, the way that Argo CD works with the GitOps is very different from what our developers were used to before. And I think that we should have spent more time to get them on board with the new process, gotten their input, and like made them more comfortable with the changes we were about to roll out. Because we met some strong resistance at times. And I think we should have done that slightly different. But in the end, we actually got to the state where we had one of the developers saying, kudos to Plateng and their work on making my life easier as a developer. Argo CD together with automatic DNS and all that good stuff really helped me today. And this is what we live for. This is what we want to achieve. This is when we improve developer experience to a point where they actually get really happy. So this is great. So in the end, things that we more or less stopped thinking about is DNS records, certificates, and deployments. These things were something that took a lot of time and effort and cognitive load before we started using these tools, but that now just works. And once again, the star, because if you do a rebranding, suddenly you have to care about DNS records and certificates again. But I would like to say that I think it would have been so much harder for us to do a rebranding and get everything working out if we did not rely on these tools. So, in the end, our strategy as a small platform team has been to unblock developers, remove time-consuming tasks from the team, and remove time-consuming tasks from developers. And that has been our strategy, and I think it works. That's all I have for today, so thank you.